And welcome back to The Way of the Wandering Wizard. I am, as always, Robert Andrew Meredith Kennedy, although most folks know me as Bob the Wizard. And I am a pure and open channel for the finest vibrations of divine love and light, made manifest here in service to Gaia and those who travel with her. My last little video, I was waxing lyrical about my life as a professional hippie, soon become a father and a semi-professional hippie. Now, I also like to entitle today's little chapter, Don't Get Your Hair Cut, Get a Real Job. And it's not all work, there is some play. Now, over the course of that summer running up to the Grand Tucson adventure, I started to apply for jobs. I was pretty buoyant, my head was in a good space, I was late 30s, red beard at the time. I felt in my prime and ready for a proper job. I'd just walk straight back into work, wouldn't I? Alas, that was not to be. The recession that was starting to pinch was across the board. Employers were getting quite choosy. I was the right age, right size, right shape, right knowledge, but didn't have the work experience. That, or I was just too old and they wanted someone young that was coming in as an apprentice. I'll be honest, the kickbacks started to knock my confidence. I can't say that I slid back into depression, but it was certainly unpleasant. I lost track of how many jobs I was applying for. I'd spend my Monday morning applying away, the rest of the week getting my knockbacks. I was called to a few interviews, clearly looking like this, even dressed in a suit. I wasn't the right candidate for the job. It was a trying time. My mum, bless her cottons, listened as she always does and offered the usual sage advice. Don't you worry, love, something will turn up. As always, she was right. But yeah, as I worked through, the little knockbacks, the lack of work on the crystal circuit, wand sales were starting to drop. And so I reverted to my standard coping strategy. Now, back in my youth, I'd have gone to the pub, sounded off to mates. If you got less work, got less money. I was soon to be a father. I still went out and had a beer when we could. I was still riding bikes when we could. Applying for jobs all over the place. But I reverted back to a coping strategy that many use. I went online and played games. Now, I started, when I was a youth, computers didn't really exist. Even when I started at the fault, computers were pretty huge. It was over those years that we started to get personal computers. I sat around with mates, I played a few games, I enjoyed the strategy games, of course. Playing Dungeons and Dragons online with a computerised dungeon master, right up my sleeve. Like a lot of folk, I suppose, I have an active imagination. This was like being able to play inside a book, but with this open-ended script. They were great times, and I don't regret any of my gaming experiences. Towards the end, it was a bit too much. Now, for many years, I played offline games. Like a lot of folk, if I wasn't at work or at the pub, it's a good way to unwind. I didn't always enjoy the same television that the good lady does. She was often tired and stressed from work and needed to off-gas. And I needed to off-gas as well. What better way than charging around on a computer screen, living out your World War II fantasies, playing in a Medal of Honor league. I got to meet some great friends. My introduction to it was the same as many others. I was playing a game around a friend's house thinking, this is tricky. To be told it was a real live person, in the States no less. It doesn't sound like much these days, but back then it's quite a thought from a child that, if I wanted to play with kids in the States, even cowboys and Indians, I'd have had to have got on an aeroplane. Well, over the course of my more warlike gaming experiences. I ended up flying around in Vietnam with Vietnam veterans, no less. Guys flying helicopters in there from their front rooms in the States. Great big, they look like cockpits that they built. Joyous times. Well, I fell out of favour with a lot of these games when I realised that not everybody was playing them on the same playing field, and that there were lots of hacks. And then the leagues got into this. It was longer to go through the checking that nobody was cheating phase before you could actually play the game. That, and it became an exploitation of game physics, not real world stuff. Believe me, folks, seriously. You throw a hand grenade at the 5th brick above a window ledge, it doesn't bounce down an alleyway, it bounces back and kills all of you. Anyway, I digress. Having lost my shine with those kind of games, I gravitated to Star Wars. One of the greatest films of my life, and something which I hold dear to heart, as anyone will know me. And it being May the 4th this week, hence the reason why gaming suddenly popped back up again. I joined a group and a league playing Star Wars Galaxies, a Wookiee, as if there was any doubt in your mind. Now, many, many years ago, when I first started computer gaming, they had random name generators, and one popped out. It was Oaken Flame. Seriously. It suited my inner druid, and it was my gaming tag for years. So, playing online, seriously, this was like being in the films. Get to go to visit all the great sites, Jabba's Palace, the Sarlacc pit, all of the stuff that I still enjoy watching on the television to this day. They're a great bunch of human beings that I'm still in contact with. The fact that we all had headphones, TeamSpeak, and all of the clever stuff that was coming out at the time, still present now. It's a real sense of community. Playing with your mates, but rather than playing over the common. Your mates came from all over the UK, all over the world. Good friends in Holland. They were wonderful, wonderful years. And as I said, what safer place for me to be out playing with a good bunch of friends. The missus knowing full well that I was just sitting in the room next door. I mean, of course, there was a few gripes. As with many couples, boys, we can get a little bit obsessive. And I wouldn't say I was obsessive, but I'm a bit of a completionist. So I would play games properly. Like both sides right the way through in every different iteration that you could. Get the most out of the game. In many ways, it's how I do my life. Having moved on from Galaxies, once they started playing again, the madness of it, spent years enjoying the joys of eventually might do enough with the game to become a Jedi. They opened it to all comers, simplified a game, just made it easy, made it instant, in order to pander to a market. Now, if that sounds like a bitter and twisted old almost Jedi Wookiee talking, it is. We moved on, and although I initially did not like the graphics, we became a World of Warcraft guild. While I might not have initially liked the graphics, I certainly liked the game. And I think it's fair to say that I became highly focused on World of Warcraft. I have an active mind, an active imagination, a busy mind, always have had. Head always in a book, always thinking of what life's all about. That mind and games just seemed to work together. It really did. I lived my life in many ways vicariously through my characters online. And when I look back at them, most of those were damn fine characters. Well balanced. A little bit light, a little bit dark. Mostly light. I, of course, as a healer, gravitated to roles of healing. I enjoyed just the experiences of working online with folk. But it did start to fill my day. I was depressed-ish from the kickbacks at work, until eventually one day my somewhat stressed good lady came home, quite rightfully, and asked what I'd done. And as I waxed lyrical about all the adventures and the people that I'd helped, and I'd done this and I'd done that, did this dungeon, got that suit of armour, rah, 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 and I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of gold coins. And she quite reasonably looked me in the face and went, "Bob, it's all in your head, love. That's not real." And it was that startling realisation that I quite literally was gaining as much out of my day-to-day life by playing online as I was gaining from real life. More so. I had quite literally started to live in the Matrix. It was the focus of my life. It was the distraction of my life. And with a child upcoming and responsibilities, I think that was probably the point that I realised that I probably ought to back off from online gaming. Games in general tends to focus my mind and I get lost in that trap. I share this because it's a purpose of knowing yourself. I learnt a lot about myself by the way I play games. What quests I hesitated with, what behaviour in other players irritated me. Was it something that I would do? The fact is that when we are hidden behind a screen, hiding behind an avatar, and not always ourselves get to play out all of those aspects of self. And generally the way that some folk play games and the games that they choose to play, might be worth having a look at yourselves, guys. Just saying. That said, if it is a space where these thoughts can be played out digitally without impacting on the real world, then maybe it has its place. Well, lecture on computer games and me trying to make some justification for quite literally spending hundreds of hours of my life leaving through a little tiny character running around on the screen, it did teach me something about myself. It certainly was a great distraction while I was recovering with my leg, which I'll go on to later. Although those were offline games. As I said, I have a tendency to become obsessed. So, having had my grand lecture and wake-up call that I didn't ought to be living in World of Warcraft, and my mum, being my mum, she was quite right. I always fancied a job on Ashdown Forest. I wanted to be a ranger. It's our local forest. It's our wildest piece of land. Acres of Winnie the Pooh country. So I applied, or inquired, after a job as a ranger. Alas, I'd worked for years, since marrying the good lady and before, on the farm. I had rural skills. I could drive a tractor, not very well. I could certainly use a fence panger. I was relatively skilled with a chainsaw. I certainly knew my way around livestock. I thought that I had a good set of practical skills, but as always in the world, folk wanted qualifications, and I didn't have any. But in the process of inquiring, I was asked, had I ever worked with the military? Well, alongside them for 16 years. There was a job coming up as the training area warden on Pippingford Park training area. And so, in the process, while I was out in Tucson, I had busily applied for the post. And on my return back from Tucson to a heavily pregnant wife, I had an interview. Now, as I said, if I put a suit on, I still look like this without the hat and the suit on. I certainly wasn't prepared to, compromise my wizardly self, I suppose. But either way, my job experience certainly helped. The fact that my boss at the time had worked in bomb disposal certainly gave him an idea of what we were capable of working on. And I was the best candidate for the job. Duly offered the job, I started my career as a lands warden. A wonderful time of my life, which I will cover in the next chapter at Fatherhood and Forest Life. Thank you as always for listening. Take care, go well, and blessed be. And as a little PS, for those of you who are thinking, is he ever getting back to hospital? It was as a lands warden and a father that I was hit by a car on my way to work. So thank you for listening. We have after many hours, done full circle, and what I'd hoped to do, which was to share a glimpse of my life, to give you a picture of the person that you're going to be meeting again in a couple of chapters' time, recovering in hospital. It seemed important to me. It is important to me that I share my story, and through my story we'll all gain an awareness that everyone has been through something. Everyone in hospital is not just a patient, it's not just a person, it's not just somebody with a difference of opinion. There is probably a reason why they are the way they are. Maybe we ought to give them a little bit more grace, or at least the opportunity to explain themselves. But hey, that's just the musings of an old white wizard who has been workshopping all day. Thank you for the PS. As always, take care, go well, and blessed be.